Welcome to the end of being alone inside your mind. You're tethered to another and you worried all the time. You always knew the melody, but you never heard it rhyme. She's fair and she is quiet, Lord. She doesn't look like me. She made me love the morning. She's a holiday at sea. The New York streets are as busy as they always used to be. But I am the mother of Evangeline. The first things that she took from me were selfishness and sleep. She broke 1,000 heirlooms I was never meant to keep. She filled my life with color, canceled plans and trashed my car. But none of that was ever who we are. Outside of my windows are the mountains and the snow. I hold you while you're sleeping and I wish that I could go. All my roadie friends are out accomplishing their dreams, but I am the mother of Evangeline. And they've still got their morning paper and their coffee and their time, and they still enjoy their evenings with the skeptics and the wine. Oh, but all the wonders I have seen, I will see a second time. From inside of the ages through your eyes. You are not an accident where no one thought it through. The world that stood against us made us mean to fight for you. And when we chose your name, we knew that you'd fight the power too. You're nothing short of magical and beautiful to me. I'll never hit the big time without you. So they can keep their treasure and their ties to the machine. 'Cause I am the mother of Evangeline. They can keep their treasure and their ties to the machine. 'Cause I am the mother of Evangeline. New York City girl, 25, 35, hello baby, New York City girl.
Gorgeous, the new fragrance by Michael Kors.
We're trying.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of our families and our staff members to our second Rush-Henrietta Wellness Workshop. I'm Diane Wynn, and I'm the Director of Wellness and Equity in Rush-Henrietta. I'm really excited to be here tonight with all of you, and I'm thrilled that we have over 100 people registered for this workshop, which is incredible. As you may be aware, Rush-Henrietta has 4 district priorities that guide all of our work, and mental wellness is one of those priorities. We know that Rush-Henrietta is a strong community, but the past year has been extremely challenging for so many of us. And while COVID-19 has impacted the physical health of many, we also know that we cannot focus on health without also considering the importance of mental health. That is why we have chosen to focus tonight's workshop on the topic of fostering resilience in our children, our families, and ourselves. Before I introduce our presenter, I would just like to go over a few quick housekeeping items. I'd like to thank everyone who submitted questions while you registered for this event. We had so many great questions submitted. We have shared the themes of these questions with our presenters, and I will be asking them some specific questions tonight when we have our panelists come on. You'll also be able to ask questions of the panel in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We ask that you wait until after Dr. Heatley's presentation to submit your questions, as we may not see them if they're being submitted throughout the presentation. Another thing I wanted to mention is that we did receive several questions regarding anxiety and depression in children and adolescents. And I would like to share with everyone that our first wellness workshop in Rush-Henrietta was with Dr. James Wallace, a child psychiatrist, and he focused specifically on this topic. So if you would like to visit and review Dr. Wallace's video, we have it on our website. You can also visit www.rhnet.org/firstworkshop. We will also be posting tonight's presentation on our website in the coming weeks. So now I'd like to introduce our wonderful guest speaker for tonight, Dr. Melissa Heatley. She is a clinical child and adolescent psychologist, and Dr. Heatley directs the expanded school mental health team at UR Medicine, which provides comprehensive school-based behavioral health services to youth and educators. She is not only a wealth of knowledge, but I can tell you in my interactions with Dr. Heatley that she's extremely dedicated to supporting our community in mental health and behavioral health, and she's one of the kindest people I know. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Melissa Heatley.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'm really happy to be here tonight to talk with the Rush-Henrietta community about strategies for fostering children's mental health and resilience, and also families' mental health and resilience during these really challenging times. I'm also really thankful to be here with 3 expert panelists who will be joining us for the second half of our conversation today. And you can see our lovely faces here. We'll be joined by Dr. Tuma Kurian, who is also a child and adolescent psychologist. Dr. Annalyn Gibson, who is a child and adolescent psychiatrist who works on our team, and Jessica Wagner, who is a wonderful crisis therapist at our Pediatric Behavioral Health and Wellness Outpatient Service. And we're really fortunate to have these experts joining us to share their experience and their expertise and their thoughts in response to your many questions. Tonight, I want to start this conversation with what I think is an important acknowledgement. We are still in the midst of a national crisis. We are coming up on spring, and it does feel like the winter is thawing, and the national crisis feels like it's thawing. Things are getting better. We have vaccines on the market, and people are starting to feel a sense of hope. And also, our kids are still learning in an environment that is different from the traditional learning environment. They haven't been distance learning during this time. They've been at home during a crisis trying to learn. And our parents, we haven't been working from home. Parents have been home during a crisis trying to work and trying to teach and trying to parent, et cetera, and it's a lot. And also I want to acknowledge our educators, some of whom have joined us tonight. teaching during this coronavirus pandemic is so far from typical, and it's literally nothing our school systems have ever done before. And I have great respect for the work that our educators are doing right now, and the dedication that they're showing to our students and our families. And also, all of this has an impact. These are just two images that help me think about how COVID-19 has impacted our parents and our families and our educators, many of whom are one and the same. So the one on the left, I like this caption: "Mom, don't take this the wrong way, but I hope I can go back to real school next fall." And mom's thinking, yeah, me too, because it's tough trying to work and also parent and teach. And on the right, you see our invisible load of parenthood, distance learning edition. And the original graphic was regarding motherhood, but I think this year in particular, we have really seen our fathers step up and demonstrate how dedicated they are to our kids, and also how much work we as parents are being asked to navigate, and how many different things we're being asked to juggle while we're trying to support our kids and not lose our cool and coordinate with teachers and also be parents. And then we think of our kids. So up here are just some examples of how kids might be feeling during the coronavirus pandemic, and also the many challenging events of this year. And on the left side, you see fight, flight, and freeze. These are 3 common responses to stress that many of our kids might demonstrate, and that we're seeing a lot this year. That flight response might look like withdrawing. It might look like avoiding work or skipping their Zoom class, daydreaming, zoning out, seeming to sleep. That fight response might look like acting out or acting even silly, defiance at home that's really atypical or unusual for them, or being really hyperactive and feeling really tense, arguing a lot. That freeze response can be the, who cares? What's the point of this anyway? Having trouble participating in school, giving blank stares, feeling numb or disconnected, feeling like they can't move, being overly attached to their phone and just kind of scrolling through social media. And some of our kids are doing pretty okay. They've tolerated the return to school, or they're tolerating it. They're socializing, even if from a distance. They're largely engaged in participating, but they also likely have some mixed emotions and mixed feelings. At the same time, they can still derive some pleasure from returning, and many are very happy to see their friends. Many of our kids are showing all of these feelings, sometimes within an hour. This is normal, and it's important for us as adults to normalize these emotions as part of a stress reaction to what has been a very stressful year for us. So tonight I'm going to talk about stress and resilience. One of the things that our research has really shown us is that not all stress is bad. Our stressors can be actually positive. They can be manageable. They can also be toxic, however. And toxic stress is stress like child maltreatment or neglect that is really difficult to overcome, and still our kids can demonstrate resilience. Tolerable stress is stress that kids learn how to cope with and can overcome. Positive stress is what we think of as stealing or stress inoculation. So many of our positive stressful experiences might be preparing for an SAT exam, might be preparing for a big soccer or football game, might be preparing to reach a goal like taking a driver's test. And experiencing stressful situations and gaining skills during these stressful situations can really help promote resilience and help develop kids' skills. The most predictive factor that identifies how kids respond to stress, though, are our supportive and caring adults. That's you guys, that help kids learn how to cope with these tolerable stresses. So what I want us to think about is we've had a lot of our kids exposed to stress We might have a sense of heightened fear, anxiety. We might be seeing our kids showing that fight, flight, or freeze response. And all of these responses may be magnified by the broader context of disparities, injustice, unrest, disruption, isolation, fear about the future. And tonight we're going to talk about how family and school and community can play a really critical role in helping our kids rise and steel themselves and develop skills in the face of stress. And this is what I think of as resilience. Resilience, the definition is the capacity for adapting successfully in the context of adversity. And I like these images of beautiful flowers growing through the cracks. Even beautiful things can grow in challenging environments. And that's what we want for our kids. We want them to develop that resilience even when there's challenge. There are some real natural examples of resilience in our world, in our communities. And Malala Yousafzai is an example of somebody who said, I really want to get an education. And she said, I said to myself, Malala, you must be brave. You must not be afraid of anyone. You are only trying to get an education. You are not committing a crime. And she went to school. We also see resilience in Bethany Hamilton, who you may remember many years ago was a competitive surfer and was experienced a shark attack, which took her arm. And she went on and continued her career as a professional surfer and now has a beautiful family. We see examples of resilience all around us in our local communities as well, with kids who are learning adaptive skiing and adaptive hockey. I picked these pictures because I used to coach both adaptive skiing and adaptive hockey. And let me tell you, these kids can ski and skate circles around me when they are on their sit skis or on their sit skates, and are a picture of resilience. When I share these pictures, many people say, you know, okay, these are some really extreme examples. But one of the things I want you guys to take home from tonight is that resilience actually isn't an exception. Resilience is ordinary. Resilience is the norm. And one of the things that we've found over years of research is that it's a process of child development that unfolds over time, and it's baked into our DNA and it's baked into the human experience. Our kids show resilience oftentimes in different areas. Some of our kids might be resilient in some areas of life, but not others, and it's sometimes, but not others. But the norm is to show resilience. So this is a graphic from Ann Maston and Tellegen in 2012 that is a really seminal paper that describes different trajectories of resilience. And you can see different types of kids who are in different levels of functioning at different points of time. And you can see here that regardless of kind of where you start, we see our kids who are kind of okay, this is line A, at the beginning, and then they experience a stressful event. That's that red line right there. And then at the end, that subset of kids, they're still doing pretty okay. We also see that some kids might be doing okay, and then they have a period of time that they're struggling, but then they get back to doing pretty okay towards the end. We also see our kids who are doing okay, they experience a stressful event, and they learn skills and they steel themselves and they rise above and beyond the challenge. Some of these kids were actually not doing so well before the stressful event, and they're really thriving afterwards. It's remarkable. We do have a subset of kids who might really be struggling before the event and then might struggle a little bit after the event as well. And at the same time, we are seeing in general a return to baseline for the vast majority of our kids. How does this happen? Well, our resilience is all around us. It stems from positive feelings, a sense of self-esteem, close friendships, and especially caring adults. The number one predictor of resilience beyond environment is connection with a warm and caring adult who can foster kids during challenging times and help them develop skills that can help them overcome challenges. We also see that specific biological factors can be meaningful, but adult connection and support is the #1 predictor of resilience. And resilience is not extraordinary, resilience is very ordinary. And our ingredients for resilience are actually also very ordinary, like having our positive adult role models, or learning skills to cope with tough feelings. Across studies of child maltreatment, we see that 25% of our most at-risk kids are showing resilience, but we see the greatest resilience when even a teacher, one caring teacher, shows interest in that kid. And those signs of resilience really go up when we're fostering kids' skills, when we're providing warmth and support. So in summary, the things I want you to take away from this beginning of our conversation is that resilience is not a trait. It's not inborn. You are not resilient or not resilient. Resilience is part of the human experience, and we are all resilient. Resilience is a process, and it takes time, and skills and people. Resilience is ordinary. We can expect kids to become resilient. We can build resilient kids. So to this point, I want you to think about the ways that your kids have shown resilience this year. You see our kids who are working so hard through online learning. We see our kids who are being supported by warm and caring parents, educators, adults to meet their goals. We see teenagers who are walking and talking and fighting for things that they believe in. We see people who are voting and people who are engaging and participating in life. And this is the real resilience that I see around me every day. And I'm just blown away by our teens and by our kids and by our little guys, and especially by our parents and educators supporting and being there for all of them. When we think about resilience, what are we looking for? We're looking for being able to set realistic goals. We're looking for self-control. We're looking for the ability to develop optimistic thinking patterns, to recognize emotions in themselves and other people, to develop good social skills, problem-solving skills, and understand and accept your own strengths and weaknesses, and to be able to recognize and overcome your own mistakes. And how do we foster this in our kids? We can build it through fostering a sense of safety and security, a sense of connection with adults, with a sense of calm and comfort in their community, in their school, in their home, and developing a sense of self-empowerment and a sense of hope. We're going to talk through each of these. So first off the bat, one of the most important pieces of helping kids develop resilience is to promote a sense of safety and security. You cannot show resilience without feeling safe and secure. What does this mean? This means that adults in kids' lives, especially during times of stress, need to be nurturing and affectionate, be sensitive to kids' triggers, and be empathetic. Even if you don't agree with their choices, reflecting the fact that they may feel that our kids, when they're saying, I don't want to go to school, I don't want to do this homework, that they may feel frustrated, they may feel tired, they may feel disappointed in something, and identifying their emotions, saying, you're feeling frustrated right now, you're feeling angry, you're feeling tired, and telling them that you hear them. Setting consistent, predictable routines is critical during this time. And having a schedule that you're following even on remote days, even on weekends, so that you have a sense of predictability in our kids' lives can be really helpful. If you know that certain things really bug your kid or really upset them, like being approached from behind, or if the light's getting turned off, or certain people or situations, let other people know, let educators know, let other adults in that kid's lives know, so that they can help problem solve around them. And if you know something might be triggering, like an alarm is going to go off, or the lights are going to go out, or there's going to be a sick day, give advance warning if you know something might be upsetting. We also can promote safety and security by focusing in on the kids' needs. So think about if your kid is really struggling in school, think about 2 to 3 additional supports that might be most necessary to support a kid's learning, and really partner with your school to help enact these supports. And if your kid is really struggling with frustration or organization or learning or managing the many demands of screen time, partner with your school team to really think about how they can support your kid and how you might be able to support your kid in the living room, learning at home, or by connecting with school. There's a lot that can be done to support our kids' needs during this time. There's also, for many of our kids, a sense of like, we don't know when things are going to open up. We don't know what happens next. There's a lot of fear that our children have. I like this cartoon as an example of how to handle these conversations. When we don't have answers for big questions like what's going to happen, when are things going to open, when's the vaccine going to be available for younger kids, we don't have to have answers for these things. What we do need to do is frame an honest response within a story of safety and security. And this response can soothe kids' anxiety while also holding their questions. So it's okay to say, I don't know, but I know that people are working hard every day to take care of each other. I know people are working really hard at getting things figured out, and I'm going to help you get there. Relationships are critical. So one of the second thing that you can do as a family is to build connection with family and community. So what does that mean? Planning opportunities for high quality togetherness is so important. Many families have spent a ton of time this year together, period. And so when I say spend some time together, everyone's kind of like, oh my God, we spent all this time together. But oftentimes our time together isn't high quality. And when I say high quality, I mean time that we are connecting with each other, that we are sharing enjoyment of each other, that we are laughing together, or that we're problem solving together. And sometimes you have to plan those opportunities, and think about what it is that your family does or enjoys. In our family, we may bake together, or we may go to the playground, and plan time that you can really respond to your kid and talk with them, or just be quiet together, go for a quiet walk together. You can also learn about your family's culture and traditions and really lean into them. Practice these cultures and traditions often. Daily rituals like bedtime or stories for our younger kids, games and cooking, joining in your kids' play is all comforting and all enjoyable for our children and builds connection. And yes, that might mean that you might play Minecraft with your kid, and join in on your kids' play and ask them what it might be that they like about this game, and see maybe they can teach you something. I've heard some families have great success with family book clubs, family board game nights, and then trying to connect with people we haven't seen in a long time. It's been a year for some of us or longer. Video chats are important. Sometimes having an activity to do during those video chat really help. And we'll disseminate these slides later, but this link down here is an example of some video chat games that you can play with grandparents or aunts or uncles. Questions and answers you might share that makes the video chats a little bit more engaging than just like, hey, say hi to your grandma. Letter writing can also be a wonderful thing. So early in the pandemic, our family was doing a ton of art, and I just started asking people for their addresses and sticking them in an envelope. And I was amazed at how much joy that brought people. And then they would call me and talk with me about it. And that is a way that you can foster connection with your kids and with your relatives, even when they're not with you. We also want to foster kids' relationships with school. So what does that mean? We remember that our warm and trusting relationships with adults are foundational for learning, motivation, and resilience. And friendships are also critical. Our teens especially thrive on interaction with their peers. And so parents, help teachers know your kids' needs. Communicate with them if your kid is really struggling and what it is that they're struggling with. Also share their strengths and strategies that you've overcome challenges in the past. They're going to have some good ideas for you too. Offer regular temperature check-ins and share observations you have of your kiddo as they're navigating this new normal. Ask teachers to share their observations with you as well. That can be really critical feedback for you as a parent also. And then share ideas for how teachers can best support your kiddo. And on the right, you can see some note-taking devices that you could use. So 3 strategies that are working for my kid at home are this. Are there other challenges that you really want a teacher to be aware of that the kid is facing at home so that they can help a kid navigate it? And putting that in writing and sending it to school can be really useful. We also, as parents, need to be persistent and patient. And remember, our teaching and learning during this coronavirus pandemic is really far from typical. It's literally nothing our school systems have ever done before. Parents maybe have to be more proactive at home, more proactive in reaching out, more persistent at engaging their kids and engaging their school team than usual, because our kids aren't immediately with their educators all the time. And parents, we need to be focused on our kids' goals. Think about if something's not working, make sure people know and ask for help. Keep records and notes so everybody can stay on the same page and collect data. And also be understanding and patient and kind. Our educators are so dedicated to helping your children. Expressing a sense of understanding and empathy and kindness can go so far in helping our kids as well, and in helping our kids connect with our educators. And collaborate with school. An agenda for school meetings can be really helpful. You want to stay in touch with your kid's teacher, and so writing down questions ahead of time that you might have for your educators can be useful. You also now should be letting your team know about highs and lows of experiences, discussing strengths and challenges and concerns and questions you might have. And then continue the process of collaborative discussion along the way. And it's okay to ask if there's other school partners who might also be helpful, like a counselor or an administrator. And make sure as parents you're teaching calm and comfort. As educators, we are also teaching calm and comfort often as well. In order to teach in calm and comfort, first thing we need to do is recognize common trauma triggers and responses. And we've talked about this at the beginning, but when we see a kid who's saying, I don't care about school, interpreting it as a common trauma trigger of freezing in the face of challenges. If you're finding a kid arguing with you a lot, interpret it through the lens of fight, flight, or freeze. If your kid is really having a hard time focusing, thinking this might be a stress reaction. We need to be able to expect big behaviors during these times, during the stressful times, and respond supportively. So how do you do that? As you see feelings, name them. It seems like you're feeling really frustrated. You're feeling really angry. You're feeling annoyed at me right now. And remind them that all feelings are good feelings. Remind yourself that all feelings are okay. And we can also use strategies to calm them. There's a lot of children's literature and teen literature that can be used to normalize emotions and discuss hardships. And the Harry Potter series is one really great example. And the Golden Compass series as well, to be able to say, do you see this character, how they overcame a challenge when they were really frustrated or really sad? We as adults need to be teaching and modeling coping strategies a lot. So we'll talk a little bit about some coping strategies in a second. But first thing I want you to think about is, what do you do as a parent to cope? Talk about those coping strategies with your kid, with your team, whether it's mindful coloring or listening to calming music, deep breathing, thinking positive thoughts. Share it with them. And when you're doing it, tell them what you're doing. And you'll be surprised at how well they mimic you. And one of my favorite coping strategies is called the 5-4-3-2-1 coping technique. So it's pretty simple. You think about 5 things that you see, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. The purpose of this 5-4-3-2-1 coping technique is to bring your mind into the moment, into your surroundings. And if you take a moment and just focus on your 5 senses, it can really give you a moment to take your mind off of the things that is stressing you out. Some of our kids really benefit from emergency coping kits. So you see an example here on the right of a coping kit. I do these with kids with shoe boxes or little containers, and it might have fidgets in it. It might have comforting items or pictures of family and friends who they really enjoy. It might have some music that they really enjoy, or some things to suck on, things that they've identified can help them if they're feeling sad. And when kids are feeling sad, directing them to maybe try your coping box. If you make your coping box with your kid, it can also be a really nice bonding experience. So you learn a little bit about how each other copes. And stretching and mindfulness activities like yoga or meditation can also be helpful in lowering our baseline of stress and increasing our baseline of calm. I want you to consider for a moment a time where your family experienced something difficult. It can be big or it can be small. If you have that in your mind, I want you as a parent or as an educator to think, what helped you get through? And when it was over, what changed for your family? We want to think about how do we share our coping skills with our kids, but more than just cope, how do we bounce forward? How do we steel ourselves? How do we show our resilience when we face challenging times? To that point, my last note on how do we foster resilience is that we need to develop a narrative of self-empowerment and hope in our kids. Now, we can do this in so many different ways. We can be fostering our kids' education. We should be leaning into their loves, their passions, their interests. If it's music or sports, athletics, if it's making videos, finding ways to develop kids' skills and passions is so important for developing a sense of self-empowerment and hope. I'm just going to share an example of how we've done this in our family. And I did not put this is not on TikTok. This is something I used to put together for this training. I want us to think about how are we empowering our kids to accomplish their goals. How do we give them the language and the skill and the space to empower them to overcome obstacles? So I'm just going to press play on this 1-minute video.
I wish I could. I wish I could. I wish I could climb up you. I could. I wish. Hush. Oh no. It's going to be deeper. No. 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 Let me melt. Down you. I'm going to be deeper. It's going to. It's going to. It's going to. It's going to. It's going to.
You did it! You did it! You climbed the mountain!
I climbed
Look-
the
Look
mountain.
at me!
I share this because it's such a good example of a kid facing an obstacle that might be too big for them and coaching themselves through it, saying, I think I can, I think I can. You can tell we're reading that book a lot right now. But then pushing themselves to do things even though they're really hard. And you can imagine how difficult it might be as an adult to let a kid struggle a little bit through it while offering warmth and support and acknowledgement of, I know you can do this hard thing. We can do hard things. And then when they do it, celebrating it with them. As parents, we need to help our kids see good things in life, and we need to help them see the good things that are happening even when there are challenges. So one strategy that you can do also to foster self-empowerment and hope is called 3 good things. So I want you to do this with me right now. I want you to think about what are 3 things that have gone well today? And what was your role in making them happen? What are 3 things that went well today? And what was your role in making them happen? By identifying things that went well today, you are actually, what you're doing is training your brain to see the positive even amidst the challenge. By identifying what your role is in making them happen, identifies that you have power to make good things happen. This is particularly impactful if you do this in your last 2 wakeful hours. It works best if you write it down. And it can be used with any age range. I do this as part of our bedtime routine with my toddler. It can be useful as a family exercise around the dinner table. It can be useful as a journaling exercise right before you go to bed. But because our brains are primed to see challenges and the bad things, this is a good way to help reset our brains to see that positive things can happen and we can make them happen even when things are hard. For our educators who are joining us today, it takes a village to build resilience. And so what are some school-based strategies that we can do as educators? Well, first things first, we need to expect big emotions. We need to expect different emotions. And so it's really important right now to be reminding our kids and teens and parents and yourself that feeling ranges of mixed feelings, even in an hour, is normal. And we can use strategies to manage these big emotions. So model expressing emotions in the classroom. And this might be an emotional check-in at the beginning of the day. It might mean identifying what color you're in. It might mean putting a post-it note, identifying a feeling at the beginning of the day. But having daily check-ins or quick notes or mood meters can be really useful ways to validate emotions and also to acknowledge them in the class. This predictability, structure, consistency is also really important in the class, and having routine is vital. And just as modeling and practicing coping skills at home is critical for parents, educators, this applies to you as well. What do you do when you're stressed? How do you practice calming yourself when you're feeling overwhelmed, either in the class or after school? Talking about it with your kids can help model ways that they can overcome those big emotions and cope with them. Remembering that some of our kids might be struggling with social distance, whether it's remembering about masks or school routines or staying apart, or mourning their friends, their loss of being able to be close or in school. I've seen educators doing a wonderful job of explaining rationale between social distancing and masking. Recognizing kids' sacrifices in protecting their family, their friends, and school community is so important. Our kids are doing a lot to keep everyone safe, and so talking about the sacrifices kids are making really validates them and empowers them. We want to really elevate our kids' voice, expressing their thoughts and feelings and needs, and validate these thoughts and feelings and needs. For teens in particular, giving choices is really vital. And knowing when it's okay to talk to a friend or if mass breaks are possible, where that is okay. But also be super clear about what you can't compromise on, and what are the rules, and what are the routines, and what are the boundaries, and enforcing them is key. And our teens should have choice, but within loving limits. And then our educators partnering with parents to prepare kids. I was just seeing so many dedicated educators working overtime to send individualized emails to parents, to sending regular updates, to communicate early and often. And I've just been so impressed by the education community's proactivity. And these are best practices, helping our kids with a new normal, communicating early and often, offering these weekly check-ins, emotional temperature checks and check-ins, and sharing ideas for how your colleagues might support kids during transitions. I've seen educators really develop really complex and wonderful plans for accommodations in a living room, and bringing kids in for support when needed. So reaching out to your educators is so important. I want to also put a plug in for the importance of social and emotional learning. So social and emotional learning is a framework for helping our kids develop a sense of self-awareness and management, develop and foster social awareness and relationship skills, and learn strategies for making responsible decisions. Kids who engage in SEL programs have been found to have better social skills, behavior, attitudes, academic achievement gains of pretty significant percentages compared to kids who don't participate. We have the national CASEL organization that supports social and emotional learning nationally across the US. But locally, we're really blessed to have the Whole Child Connection at the Children's Institute, which fosters kids' whole child health, including their social and emotional learning skills. And so those are both great resources for learning more. For our kids who are struggling even more than this, targeted school-based interventions may be needed, and there are some really good evidence-based ones out there. For our educators and school counselors, the Support for Students Exposed to Trauma program, SSET, is a fantastic program that helps our kids develop skills. And there's free online training that's available through traumawareschools.org. For our school-based mental health staff, our social workers, our school psychologists, the Bounce Back and CBITS program are really high quality programs to support kids who with more clinical post-traumatic stress disorder or trauma responses, depression, behavioral problems, and really shows improvement in functioning, grades, and attendance. And again, training is free and available online. All the curriculum and materials is available. Bounce Back is for younger kids. CBITS is for kids age 12 and up. And then there's some really great tools that you can use to assess your school mental health supports and trauma responsiveness, including the SHAPE system, which is the school-based mental health assessment and performance system. They have a ton of resources, as well as tools to assess your trauma responsiveness. And then the Trust S is hosted by CCSI, which is another community organization that can help you understand your organization's trauma responsiveness. So in our last 2 minutes, before I bring my panelists on board, my final thoughts. This is a quote from Helen Keller. Although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it. Our resilience is normal, and we can plan for resilience. And to that end, we need to do all the things that we've been talking about tonight for our kids. And we need to plan for ourselves. How do we prep for upcoming stressful situations, respond to the ongoing crises, how to push through to the finish line and cope with differences in opinions and thoughts. We need to plan ahead because we really have an obligation to our kids, as well as to ourselves, our colleagues, our loved ones, not to be damaged by the work that we're doing, not to be damaged by the demands placed on us. So we need to be gentle with ourselves. We need to be able to really prioritize parent and family wellness, prioritize educator wellness, and protect ourselves. Be aware of signs of stress and exhaustion and burnout and take action, and proactively develop a personal resiliency plan. I will send out a template that you can use to make a personal resiliency plan, but I want you guys to think of your psychological resiliency factors, emotional, spiritual, personal, professional, physical things that help you care for yourselves. How do you self-reflect? How do you affirm yourself? How do you talk to yourself? And make a plan for how you can develop resilience yourself. And think, what commitment can you make today to fostering your own resilience? And what kind of support do you need to succeed at making your wellness a priority? And then last, be gentle with other people. Sometimes we all need help and support. And helping other people can be a really great way to build your own sense of meaning and control and self-efficacy. And so help others develop resilience by partnering with them to develop a resilience plan. Lend each other support with weekly calls for social support and problem solving. Express gratitude and take time to laugh and check in on each other. Hold each other accountable for self-care and support each other. Finally, it's okay to ask for help too. At school, our teachers, coaches, principals, school counselors, psychologists, school social workers, behavior specialists, they are there for your kids. Reach out. Talk to your pediatrician. Our local pediatricians are incredibly well versed in child behavioral health and are often the frontline people who families are talking to when you have concerns, and they know how to help. Talk to your pediatrician. If you are worried about your kids' mental health, there are resources available for you in our community, and there's some listed below. We also have crisis call lines through 211 Lifeline. We have a New York State mental health call line that's available for adults. And at UR Medicine, we have a behavioral health crisis call line at 275-8686. That's staffed by licensed mental health clinicians from our team, actually. Monday through Friday, 7 to 8, Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, 10 to 6:30. We're working on making it 24/7. Ask for help if you need it. And then this will go out there, some excellent community resources on helping our kids foster resilience and helping our families learn how to foster their kids' resilience. And this is just a few of them here. And remember, you've got this. We are New York Tough and you are strong. And you can build resilient kids because we are all resilient. We've all got it in us. I'm really excited to be joined here today by our panelists, Dr. Tuma Kurian, Dr. Annalyn Gibson, Jessica Wagner, and Diane Wynn is going to be supporting us by moderating. And if folks would bring their videos on, that would be wonderful. And I'm going to get rid of my screen as we bring our videos on, but my last comments, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. All right, we have our wonderful panel here today.
Thanks so much, Dr. Heatley, and thank you to the panel. We have quite a few questions that have been submitted, so whoever feels comfortable answering the question, just jump in, and I'll kind of group them together. Just so the attendees know, I won't be answering every single question, but I'm going to group them together in categories. So one of the big categories that we got several questions about is regarding school avoidance. And how can we really help, how can parents and how can teachers really help to foster and to increase student engagement? Because that's a big area of concern. So I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit.
So I'm going to take this one because I support a lot of kids with school avoidance. First thing we want to think about is what is causing a kid to avoid school or schoolwork? What is the root of the disengagement? And for some of our kids, it's because they're anxious and something feels bad at school. It feels scary to go. It feels hard to do the work. And they're engaging in a cycle of avoidance because they feel bad and something is anxiety provoking at school. Some of our kids are also avoiding school because they're doing something fun instead, or they're getting something out of being at home. And so these might be our kids who have separation anxiety and struggle to detach from us as parents, or our kids who really are enjoying playing games all day. And so you got to really understand what the function is first. For our kids who are avoiding school because something feels bad or they're really anxious while they're there, it's really important to help address the anxiety, and helping identify that they're feeling scared or they're feeling worried, and then gradually build up the skill to do the hard things and develop coping skills. For our kids who are doing something fun at home, or kids who are playing games, or it's hard to detach from us, we also want to make home a little less enjoyable for them. We want to make home a little bit more uncomfortable. And so you want to think about, how do you set limits? How do you say, first you have to do your work before you play your games, and be willing to follow through on those limits. Other thoughts from folks?
Yeah, I'll just add again to trying to break things down into as manageable pieces as possible. I have definitely noticed a little bit of school avoidance balloon into a whole lot of school avoidance because stuff just keeps piling up. Where again, it's so important to kind of work with the educator as much as possible to prioritize and how are we going to tackle this piece by piece. Also helping with kind of the creation of like small to-do lists, or setting out little bits of work at a time, and kind of setting out, well, this is your worksheet and all that's on your desk is all you need to complete right now. Otherwise, just echoing everything Dr. Heatley said.
Thank you. So another group of questions that we have received is in regard to screen time. And if you could speak to the impact of screen time, both social media and also, video games, and also just screen time in general with virtual learning. So there were a lot of questions about the impact of that on children's and teens' mental health.
Sure, I'm happy to take that one. So, not all screen time is necessarily the same. You can kind of break it down into two categories where you have active screen time and more passive screen time. So passive screen time is more like when the child is not engaged, and they're just sitting there and watching. So watching TV, watching YouTube videos on your phone, that would be an example of passive screen time. And then you have active screen time, which is kind of what we're doing right now, where we're engaged with real people on the other side. And, the screen expects some kind of response from us. So that could be something like a learning game. That could be the child's like Zoom meeting with the teacher. It could be FaceTime with family members. So these are qualitatively a little bit different in terms of how much the child is engaged, and therefore may have some differential impacts. One thing they all do have in common is that your eyes just get tired when you're staring at a screen. And kids also tend to be more sedentary if they're on a screen. So, sometimes, like I know my children will take the cell phone and run around if they're on a family Zoom all over the place. But comparatively speaking, children will generally be more sedentary, and their eyes can get tired and they can be affected by just staring at a screen all day. So that's the common stuff. And then there's this, things that are not so common between the active and passive screen time. So just things to watch out for. Every kid is going to be different with how much they are really affected negatively by screen time. So you'll want to watch for behavioral changes in your child. Do they seem extra fatigued? Are they rubbing their eyes a lot? You can offer things like eye drops to your child. Definitely, it's recommended to take breaks about every 20 minutes or so to look at something else, ideally something far away, and then it kind of resets your eyes. And then you'll also want to look for behavioral changes. Are they having a really hard time letting go of that screen? Or can they let go of that screen appropriately? So, keeping track of those kinds of changes will tune you into whether screen time is negatively affecting your child.
Thank you. So another topic that we had some questions about were some of the effects of isolation on students who are not having that social contact. And there were some individuals who noted in there that even getting their kids or their teens to leave their bedroom has become a struggle during COVID, especially if they are virtual learning. So we're wondering if you have any strategies for that, for kids who are becoming more and more isolated.
I've seen a lot of isolation with our kids, especially who are fully remote. And I think one of the things to think about is that inertia is important in social engagement. And you have to have a routine in order to stay moving. And so what I suggest to our families is that at a bare minimum, every day a kid gets up, gets out of bed, gets dressed, and eats breakfast. And we start with the basics of a morning routine that you're doing with the family. And getting out of bed for some of our kids is actually the hardest part. But an object in motion is more likely to stay in motion, right? And so really kind of getting started is oftentimes the thing that the kids need the most help with. And so I would prioritize that initial getting out of bed, getting dressed, getting some food in them as the first thing to do. I would also be thinking about how active physically is your kid, period. And are they sitting in a chair all day and then moving into games where they're sitting in a chair all afternoon and then they're going to bed? That's going to be pretty dysregulating. And it's really important that for our physiological bodies to have light input from the sun, to have vitamin D, to have fresh air and physical movement. And so considering instituting a family routine of getting outside, even for a brief walk, can be really helpful. And these are baseline things just to help your kid become a little bit more active. And you can then build from there into more peer activities or family activities. But without the basis of a morning routine and kind of getting out and moving, that's awfully hard to do. It's a hard ask.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to do a couple more questions, and then I just want to remind everyone that if you do have questions that have not been addressed yet, you can click on your Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and you can enter the question there for the panel, and we will continue to address those. So on a related note, we were talking a little bit about the disengagement and students staying in their rooms. We did have some questions that are around self-harm. Some individuals have said that they have noticed that their kids and their teens are engaging in self-harm behaviors, and that is a new behavior for their children, and they're obviously very concerned about that. And I'm wondering if you have any strategies, kind of understanding how parents can support with that.
So I will take the lead on this one since that's kind of my job. So I'm a crisis therapist in the clinic and dealing with a lot of increase in self-harm. Recently, we've had a pretty big influx of people and kiddos that are experiencing this. And so we go obviously to the source of figuring out, like, is this a treatable condition? Like, do we need to have this kiddo be seen by a therapist? Do we need them to have a safety check? And I think Melissa did all of those nice little tips and tricks and people that we can contact and things that parents can contact as well. And so that's the first part of the self-harm thing. And also the second part to self-harm is usually in kiddos, it is a a kiddo that is in that fight, flight, or freeze usually is in that freeze moment where they are not feeling an emotion. They're not feeling anything right now. And so when they're engaging in self-harm and things, it's to feel things, it's to feel something. And so therefore they're resorting to these self-injurious behaviors. And so oftentimes one of the little skills that we give parents to just start with is helping parents and kids to grab something cold, like a cold ice cube or a peas from the freezer or whatever the case may be that you have in the freezer, and grab it and hold it and hold it and hold it until it elicits some sort of a response. And it usually is like a pain response, because if you hold cold, it's going to give you some pain after some while, and then release it. And then so from there, that kind of elicits some sort of like an emotional response that is getting to the point of pain. So that's one of the little skills that we help parents with, in something that we help kids to try to understand, that they can use a cold bag of peas if they wanted to. So that's one little tip and trick.
This is also, I think, where a coping box can be really useful. Oftentimes our kids who are self-harming are doing it not because they want to die. There's versions of self-harm called non-suicidal self-injury. That's the technical term. Kids self-harm oftentimes because they're trying to cope with pain. They're trying to express their pain. And this is where the coping box and having and developing over time tools that they can use to try when they're feeling really distressed. So like the cold can be one example, but intense exercise can also be an incredibly valuable tool in terms of decreasing your arousal. And I don't mean like sitting on the treadmill for like 5 minutes. I mean like wind sprints up and down, or lots of like really fast jumping jacks to get your heart rate going. That can really help decrease arousal. And paced breathing is also really useful. So we're thinking not just deep breathing, but 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. And I'll coach my kids to do this with a clock, even in the school classroom. This is actually really useful in school settings, where you think of the second hand, and when it hits the 5, you're breathing in, the 10, you're breathing out, the 15, you're breathing in, et cetera, for a whole minute. And the nice thing about it is nobody notices that you're doing it, but it really brings you into the moment, and it can really physiologically decrease your arousal so that the urge to self-harm passes. And it can be like a wave where it's coming and you want to do it, you just got to get past the crest of the wave. So the purpose is to really cope with and delay that wave. Other thoughts from our team?
Okay, so I'm gonna move to another group of questions, and this is kind of related to that. We had some questions regarding self-esteem in kids, and just given how challenging the year has been for everybody, you know, parents and teachers noticing that kids are being pretty hard on themselves and have expressed feeling like they're not good at things, and that their self-esteem has been impacted. So I'm just wondering if you can speak a little to that and how we can help support our students. I know this whole workshop is about fostering that kind of resilience, but if you can speak a little bit to the impact on self-esteem with this.
I can pop in for this one. I love this question. And I think this is something where that technique that Dr. Heatley mentioned towards the end, with those 3 things that went well today and what was your role in making those happen, is huge. Focusing on the kids' role in helping good and positive things happen within the family unit, within their lives, any areas that we can. I also think this is a really important time to talk about being gentle with ourselves as educators, as parents, as workers, and all of that, so that we can model that for our kids too. I know most primary care doctors right now are not having the conversation with anyone about weight. That's just off the table during the pandemic. And I think that's a prime example of something where I have heard multiple people, kids and adults, bring it up in this situation. So if we're aware of kind of how we're modeling, how we're gentle and kind with ourselves, our kids are going to pick up on that too.
I think those messages of hope are also really useful. And finding community examples of where people are doing hopeful things or helpful things, especially for our youngest children. There's the Mr. Rogers quote of look for the helpers. When things are scary, you should look for the helpers. In our family, we do a lot of talking about the helpers and how our helpers are getting us through hard times. For our older kids, we think about empowering them to be helpers and identifying when they are really powerful helpers. And being a helper is, you can be a helper in so many different ways. You can be a helper by talking to a friend when they're in distress. You can be a helper by helping your mom unload the dishwasher. You can be a helper by wearing a mask and being socially distant for a year because, my gosh, you have kept your grandparents out of the hospital. What a sacrifice you've made. And again, that sense of empowerment and hope, these are real things that our kids are doing. So don't just look for others, examples of helping, help them be helpers. There's so many ways to do that.
Sorry, I'm going to add one more thing because I think another thing that I want to explicitly point out about the presentation earlier was the discussion of big emotions and the fact that all emotions are good. And it's very easy for us to get caught up in, I'm experiencing a good emotion or a positive emotion or a negative emotion or a bad emotion. And this is where it's really helpful to work on the language of a comfortable emotion and an uncomfortable emotion. And then that'll help too, in that all of the emotions are good that you're experiencing. They're all valid. They're all normal. It's just that some of them are more comfortable than others.
Thank you. So we have another question here. I'm wondering if anyone on the panel has experience with mindfulness practices for students, children and teens, and also for adults. And if you have any information about that.
I love mindfulness. It's one of my favorite tools because it's like a muscle. The more that you do it, the better you get at it, and the more you are able to do it in stressful situations. Many people think of mindfulness as like sitting in one place and going and it can be that. It can be, and that can be very relaxing and bring you into the moment. But it doesn't have to be that. It can be going for a walk through your neighborhood, and while you're walking, noticing all of the green things. It can be sitting at your desk in your office and noticing what you hear in the background, in the hallway, outside. It can be taking a minute of deep breaths and really centering yourself in the moment and trying to put all the noise on the outside, or getting really into your favorite song. Mindfulness does not need to be super structured, but finding a mindful practice that works for you, whether it's like dot to dots or music or sitting at your desk is important, because the more that you practice this skill of mindfulness, the easier it becomes to do it when you're stressed. When you're really, really stressed is not a great time to be like, okay, something terrible's happening. I'm going to try starting this mindfulness thing. The best time to do it is actually like now, when you're listening to a webinar and not doing anything, or you're not doing anything else, and practicing it before you need it. It makes it much easier to be able to focus on the present moment and take breaths when you are feeling really stressed. Other thoughts about mindfulness?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I think related to the technology question that I answered before, I think we're so used to multitasking these days. We're on our phones while we're talking to other people. And, when we're eating something, we're watching YouTube videos. It's just mindfulness gives you a chance to focus on just one thing. So with all the hand washing going on these days, I think that's a perfect opportunity to practice the mindfulness before you actually, need it when you're really upset. And then focus on things like, how does the water feel on your skin? How does the soap smell? Watching the bubbles as they pop, hearing the sound of the water go by. It could be as simple as that, but just making a chance, giving yourself a chance to do that and not think about other things is going to develop that skill.
I think just a little bit more to add on to that is that whole concept of the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is using your senses. And so that's like Tuma was just saying, it's all the same stuff. It's using your senses. But there's a really awesome website for that, and it's called mindful.org. And on the top of it, it says how it works. And under how it works, it literally goes through everything that we're talking about. And it gives you some guided meditations at the end, some progressive muscle relaxation and just meditations that people can use to get to sleep or to use throughout the day. And I find that really helpful. But it also explains the whole process for it and really how to do it. So that's a really good tool to use as well.
Thank you, everyone. So we just had a new question that was entered into our question box regarding poor sleep habits, which I think we can all relate to as adults, but our students are also experiencing poor sleep habits. So the question really relates directly to what you see as the impact of this, and then any strategies you have for reestablishing really healthy sleep patterns, particularly for some of our secondary students who are really being impacted, although all of our children are experiencing some of this. So if anyone could speak to that, that would be great.
I'll pop in for this one because that's a solid 60% of the kids I see, most of my time is spent talking about sleep hygiene lately. Also, one piece for the mindfulness, just being a medication provider to tout the glory that is mindfulness, that there are lots of studies out there showing physical structural brain changes that occur with regular mindfulness meditation. So I love it. I think it's wonderful. Also echo what everyone else said on here. For sleep hygiene, I have definitely seen the inconsistent sleep schedule play a role in anxiety, depression, ADHD, kids who don't really have any diagnoses but are just struggling with a pandemic under normal circumstances, and also as referenced, adults too. A big kind of point that I think I've been trying to emphasize for kids is, first off, giving the adults permission in the sessions to be annoying about bedtime and to be annoying about setting boundaries and rules around sleep. Because ultimately you don't want bedtime to change more than 1 to 2 hours, 2 hours absolutely max between. So whether it's a hybrid night or an in-person night, it's going to be important for them to go to bed early. A very specific thing, if I have any kids on stimulants or something like that, making sure they're taking it at the same time every day, not kind of letting it be, oh, okay, well, this is when I'm going to get my work done. But if there's any sort of like morning routine that you can do, trying to emphasize that at the same time every day within an hour or two.
You also really want to emphasize the sleep routine when you're getting ready to go to bed. And that sleep routine should be something that winds you down and gets you away from blue light. With a lot of one of the challenges of our pandemic world is that we're staring at screens so much. So it's like 7:45. I'm looking at a screen right now. That blue light activates us. It actually neurologically can really arouse us and keep us awake. shutting off your phone, shutting off your computer is great if you can do that. If you can't, blue light glasses are really valuable even for our kids and not terribly expensive these days. We also have night shift abilities on phones these days that can make they can take the blue light out of your phone. I really encourage people to shut off their phones if they can, and if they can't, to make sure that your night shift is on. But also for your routine, have something you're doing every night in the last hour or two leading up to bed. So you go upstairs at a certain hour, you may drink some tea, you have quiet time, you're listening to quiet music. If you have a younger kid, they're playing in their room, maybe quietly for 15 minutes, and then you have story time. For our older kids, it may be we're having tea, you're quietly talking for a little while, or resting, or looking at a magazine or a book, listening to some music, and then making sure that the lights are out within 15 minutes of the established bedtime. We don't want to be staring at videos or your phone when you're in bed. If you really need help shutting off your mind, using that mindful.org, that website that was shared earlier, can be useful. Listening to podcasts can be one tool that people can use to kind of get their mind off of things and also keep their phone out of their face. Or using breathing exercises or mindfulness while you're falling asleep can be useful.
Thank you. So before I go on to the next question, I just wanted to share, I did see at the bottom there was a participant who was trying to raise their hand. We don't have that feature set up for this webinar, but if you want to put your question into the Q&A at the bottom, we will definitely be sure that that gets answered. Okay, so we had another question here, and Dr. Healy, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but it has to do with how do you comfort kids who are frustrated because their family may be following the rules a little differently than other families? And so they're feeling really frustrated because they may not be interacting with their friends, and they may hear of other friends that are doing things differently. And so it's causing a lot of built up frustration. I'm wondering if anyone has any suggestions for things that parents and teachers can say to students.
Yeah, I would say that, as the adults in the family who've kind of set those rules up with the child or with the teenager, sort of talking about why it's important in your family that you're, following the rules in maybe a more strict way. And that's why, the teen can't hang out with their friends the way, the other teens can. But maybe even problem solving that with your teenager. So thinking like, fine, you can't hang out with your friends in person, but I am open to you, hanging out outside and being distant. So being a little bit creative about what you can do versus focusing on everything you can't do, including things like, talking with friends, saying, maybe I can't go in person, but can you FaceTime me so I don't miss out on everything? So just problem solving, using those problem solving skills and finding a way.
I think also validating their feelings that this is frustrating. This is hard. It's really annoying, and you're making sacrifices. Acknowledging their sacrifices and their hard work, which I know we've talked about earlier. But remember that all feelings are good feelings. They're allowed to feel frustrated. They're allowed to express their frustration, and that we need to be able to hold that and tolerate that, because it's frustrating for all of us. It's hard.
So related to that, we had a question about avoiding power struggles and battles with kids over lots of different things right now. But really specifically, somebody noted that sometimes the line gets a little blurry between showing compassion and support for children and really pushing them to do their best. So I'm wondering if you have any suggestions for how to avoid those power struggles.
I have an analogy that I like to share, and it's the three basket analogy. Um, on the one basket, you have your health and safety related issues. These are situations that you cannot compromise in, and that you might have to deal with a power struggle and set a limit as a parent and say, this is a non-negotiable, this is what our family is doing. Health and safety, I think of as like taking care of yourself. I think of as making safe choices, and of doing things like going to your doctor, taking your medication, taking care of yourself. The other side of your basket, on the opposite end, are the things, the life's too short basket, where like, do you really need to like pick that fight today? So the example that I use sometimes is that, like, my 2-year-old doesn't want to wear her coat on her way to the car. Does it drive me nuts? It certainly does. Is it going to kill her? No, it's not. And so, you know what, she doesn't wear her coat an awful lot when it's really, really cold out, and that life's too short to have that fight. The only decisions you need to make about whether I should fight this battle is the middle basket, the basket where how much is this health and safety? How much of this is life's too short? And a lot of those questions are like, where should I set limits around going to school? Where should I set limits about completing work? And where should I, like, what are the things that we really like need to push on? And for those, I really suggest that you think about like what your family values are and what your vision is for your kid in the future, and what you really want to, the skills that you really want to build in your child, and pick the battles that you need to. If you got to use an extra hour or two of screen time to get through the day because you got a work meeting, like, you got to do that. Life's too short, and you got to go easy on yourself. But really try to narrow down the battles that you need to pick.
Okay, so I think we're going to do our last question here, and I think this is a perfect question to end our workshop tonight. And this is regards to how to meet students' needs and children's needs when they return to in-person learning. So any suggestion the panel has for preparing students for this, because we're all very hopeful for this. We know this will happen at some point. So how do you prepare students for that? And also, how do you help them adjust to all of the changes when they return to in-person learning?
I would say, to kind of kick things off, make sure not to avoid the topic, to absolutely talk about it, bring it up, even if it's anxiety provoking, to still talk about it, and to talk through then the anxiety when it comes up. This can definitely be a thing. Like, anyone who has school avoidant kids to begin with is probably familiar with this, that it's a lot tougher after a longer break, a long weekend, something like that. And that if we just pretend like it's not really a thing, and then the school day comes and it'll be fine, we all know that it's not. So it's helpful to just kind of talk and set that expectation that, well, there will be a time where it comes to in-person, and we'll update as much as we can. Though, as I'm sure kind of is coming up with this question, there's a whole different level of anxiety now that, we've been telling people not to be around each other in person and not to do all these things, and then there will come a time where we are going to be. And so leaving space to talk about how that might be confusing and scary, and the social anxiety aspect combined with the illness anxiety aspect, and just leaving all sorts of room to discuss that.
Gradual practice with going back to school is really important. And so it starts with talking with your kids. For your kids who really have had a hard time going to school this year, starting out by small visits to school, whether it's to the playground or to the parking lot, and making those visits safe and enjoyable for them. And maybe it's you're eating a delicious meal takeout in the car is the first thing that you're doing. then gradually stepping into the school and looking around, and then gradually meeting with a counselor to say, hey, how you doing? And then predicting what your routine is going to look like and what other kids might say, what you're going to do to keep yourself safe, and also predicting success for your kid. It can be really easy to get wrapped up as a parent in the fears and the worry, and to kind of ruminate with your kid about how scary it might be. It's important to hold and validate their feelings, and also say, and we can do hard things. We can do this together. And I'm here to help you do that. And so is the rest of your community.
So it's really funny that you say all that, Melissa, because that's exactly what I've been doing, especially with my son, who's going to be a rising kindergartner, who is kind of on the timid, kind of shy side to begin with about, school. So he was the preschooler who would like hang on to my leg and clutch onto his sister before going into the classroom. And so I'm like, oh gosh, now he's going to have to start kindergarten. It's like, in this kind of situation. So we've already started taking a visit to the elementary school. We played on the playground, when nobody was there, wearing our masks. And we visit, I plan to increase the frequency of our visits to the school, and then also playing nearby the school. We practice communicating with teachers and how exciting that is. So I know that our libraries offer like free sort of book reading sessions where you get to interact with a teacher-like person. And there's all sorts of classes online that you can even purchase if you wanted to for like $5 that are like kindergarten readiness. It just gets the child used to having to do those school-like things. And we also practice at home, where this is your desk, you take out your pencil. We practice all those little behavioral steps that are going to be expected in school. And we talk about how exciting it is and how fun it is and how nice it was to interact with the teacher and how cool it's going to be when they're interacting in person. We also make it a point to understand how you can safely interact with people. So we wear a mask, so we're okay. You can still say hi to friends when you wear a mask. So giving that permission to have fun with your mask on. And it was not like it worked the first time. We had to go out a few times and get used to being able to wear a mask and not be nervous while we're wearing a mask.
Well, thank you, everyone. I just want to say on behalf of everyone in the Rush-Henrietta School District, thank you, Dr. Heatley, and thank you to the panel of experts. This was a ton of valuable information. We greatly appreciate it. And I also want to say to all of the parents and all of the RH staff members who attended, thank you for partnering with us. We all know that we are much stronger together. So we appreciate everyone attending tonight and learning together, and continue to take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.